Hello, my name is Mark, and I want to welcome you here to Gov School. This is a series that GovDirections has been offering to help our members learn just a little bit more about how to win government contracts. And as a part of that, we've been focusing on particular topics. Today, we're going to focus in on local governments, cities and counties and schools. There's thousands of those in the United States, and each of those with spending power. And one of the sessions that we like to help you with is to help you understand how that decision making is used to actually make a procurement decision. GovSchool does have a number of different sessions each week, and you can go to our schedule at any given time and look at the active ones and then our library for stored ones. We focused in on the federal government. We focused in on state agencies, but today we're going to take a minute and talk about local governments. And we have with us one of our summer interns, Jessica Davis, who is a student at the University of Georgia, and she's majored in international affairs and political science, and she'll be graduating this coming May. And we'll talk a little bit more about Jessica at the end of the session. But with that, hey, Jessica, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Hello, everyone. And like Mark said, my name is Jessica Davis, and today we'll be looking at decision-making in local government, and specifically we'll be comparing Sedgwick County, Kansas, and the city of Decatur here in Georgia. And we'll be examining the processes they use to make these budget decisions. So in order to understand decision-making, it is important to know what types of decisions local governments make. The decisions made by your state and local governments often have a great impact on your daily life in comparison to the higher profile decisions made by our national government. State and local governments enact legislation that determines your tax rates, city and county zoning violation rules, environmental protections and regulations, school curriculums, and so much more. And they also decide what funding and resources are given to city infrastructure, education, transportation, housing, and other social welfare programs. And on the next slide, we'll look at how those different kinds of influence affect the decision-making in local government. And so the different kinds of decision-making are not made without intense thought and preparation. They are influenced by a wide array of things, the biggest of these things being public opinion and the economy, and they are large drivers of the types of decisions government leaders make. And so some of the other influences that happen to influence different kinds of policymakers on their decisions are knowledge and innovation, the current social and political climate, economic conditions, and of course, public opinion and the need of their citizens. And as I mentioned earlier, the economy is a big factor on decision making. When cities or counties are in surplus, they have more money to devote to social programs or government agencies, and when they're in deficits, they are required to make cuts to those programs and departments. All of those things come to light when local governments are drafting their budget. Budgets control how much money will be allocated to different government agencies, what capital projects there are, and how they factor in terms of importance to the government, and what programs and or facilities we will see an increase or decrease of in funding, and how many outside contracts and procurement opportunities will be available. And so this is kind of a bare bones look at the budgeting process. So some budgeting processes are a lot more complex than this, and some may be just as simple as this. However, all of them include these three process steps. And so the first step is identifying the objectives. So with this step, governments are trying to decide what they want the budget to accomplish and what they plan on doing within different departments in their government. And the next step is budget development. So at this stage, the county manager or the city manager or the mayor's office are deciding how they're going to draft the proposed budget based on the needs and the objectives they identified in step one. And the third and final step is budget approval. So the budget will then go to a legislative body like a county commissioners group or the elected officials for whatever city or county that the budget is looking to be approved in, and then they will put it to a public forum for citizen input, and then the budget will be adopted and implemented. And so now we're going to get a look at Sedgwick County, Kansas, which is the second largest county by population in the state and has a population of about 500,000 and an annual budget of usually about $450 million. And their decision-making process is budget-driven. And we'll look at the steps that they use. So they certainly have a lot more steps than what I showed earlier in the typical budgeting process. And their steps usually address their economic outlook, concerns, policies, and goals. And so let's talk about the first step, and then we'll go through all the way to step 10. So they use a financial forecast development. And with that process, the staff compares historical revenues with their projections for the next year, and they revise it every couple of years. And then with the next step is their capital improvement program committee. So they set up a committee to review all of the requests for projects with significant multi-year benefits, which is usually buildings or roads, and they rank the projects in order of importance in 2 categories: facilities and drainage, and roads, intersections, and bridges. And so on the third step, they look at the environmental scans. So divisions submit a list of factors external to the division that could impact the funding that they need to provide current levels of service throughout the year, such as a growth in service volume or some contractual changes. And the fourth step, divisional program inventories. And so divisions inventory all of the programs and services using a program inventory tool. And then the next step is their budget planning retreat. So the Board of County Commissioners, the county manager, and the Department of Directors, and a bunch of other staff meet in February to outline the commissioner's financial and policy goals for the organization. And then you have step 6, their base budget development. So this is kind of where they meet with each other to get an understanding of their budget targets and kind of supplement that with the property tax supported funds and develop balanced budgets for non-property tax supported funds. And they also submit requests for additional funding as well as opportunities to increase revenue and reduce costs. And then you have the step 7, which is the budget division review. So budget staff review divisional submissions and prepare materials for budget hearings. Then step 8, you have your budget hearings. Department directors and elected and appointed officials will discuss programs and services provided by their divisions in public meetings before the county manager, budget staff, and the Board of County Commissioners. Then step 9, the county manager will then recommend his budget to the Board of County Commissioners. And then finally, in step 10, there's a public hearing and budget adoption. So members of the public are then invited to comment on the budget that's already been presented to the Board of County Commissioners at special meetings. And then that budget will then either be adopted or will be sent back to the county manager's office. So here's kind of a glimpse into the fiscal year 2020 budget and then the proposed 2021 Sedgwick County budget. And so the first look on the fiscal year 2020 picture is their financial forecast. So this is at the beginning of their budget where they talk about what the economic outlook will be for the county. So how they think that the financial forecast will be affected by, let's say, the national government, be affected by the state government's policies and things like that, and whether or not they think the county will have to raise taxes, reduce taxes, and things like that. And so the FY 2021 snapshot is one of the sheriff's departments. And in that, they justify their needs for a new airplane, and they justify their spending, and they do that throughout the proposed budget as well for other different types of contracts, programs they need to spend money on. And on the next slide, here's a picture of what the public budget hearing looks like. So they invite members of the community to speak at the final budget hearing to address their concerns. And these are, again, the photos from that. The top photo is of a citizen who is petitioning for a couple of things that she would like to happen and what she would like to see in the county. And the bottom picture is the Board of Commissioners. And that's where they sit to review the county's citizens' concerns or questions they may have about the budget. And so now we're going to be looking at the city of Decatur, which is right here in Georgia. And they have what they established in 2000 was a vision-based budgeting and community-driven decision-making. And on the next slide, we'll get a look at what their steps look like for their budgeting process. And as you can tell, their process is a lot fewer steps than that of Sedgwick County, Kansas, and includes many different programs for citizens to provide their input at various stages of the process. So step 1 is similar to what happens in Sedgwick County, is that the departments make budget requests to the city manager's office. So in this step, they're offering the concerns that the departments have for things that they may need, and they're giving that to the city manager so he can then include that with whatever plans he has for the budget. But on the next step is where things change. So they very much so include the community on all aspects of the budgeting process. So they have a public budget expo on the Decatur City Square where citizens can come ask questions, they can look at previous budgets, and they get to actually hold a budget in their hands. That way, they know what's going on, and they can see what kinds of things will be affecting them. And so after that, they present a budget to the city commission. And so again, like in Sedgwick County, Kansas, the budget is once it's drafted, it's presented to that legislative body, and in the city of Decatur, it's the city commission. And so step 4, there's a work session and a public hearing. So at the time that the city commission has either made its suggestions, they will create a work session where the city manager's office will work with the public on making any necessary changes or listening to any additional input based on the concerns and needs of the public. And step 5, the public budget happy hour. So that's a place where, and now during the COVID-19 epidemic, this was virtual and hosted on Zoom, where the public again got the opportunity to address their concerns and maybe add any other needs that they might have wanted to, that they wanted to address in the budget, and ask any questions that they had about when the budget was going to be approved, or just ask about the stage that the city of Decatur was in the budgeting process. And lastly, they have step 6, they have a final public budget hearing. So this step happens right before the budget is then sent to the city commission for approval. And again, the city of Decatur offers yet another step for the public to understand what's going on, what the budget's going to look like, how does it plan on assisting the different kinds of communities within the city, and what kinds of projects there will be. So if they're adding pavement to Agnes Scott College down on the adding sidewalks, then those projects will be listed in here, and the public can address their concerns or ask any questions about that. And on the next slide, we'll get another.
So I'll let you take just a little bit of a break there, because one thing that I failed to mention to you earlier, just guys, I actually lived in Decatur about 25 years, and we're known for the city that if there's a reason to have a festival, we have a festival. So so I think they might have to have a budget festival next time. That way we can have everybody involved. But they are actively involved. Everybody's actively involved in everything there. And that's a good way to remember that a lot of times cities are going forward with particular projects, and then things get sidelined a little bit. And because they're very responsive to the community, it's important that contractors understand that in the process. So the next slide.
Yes. So the next slide is a glimpse of the FY 2020, FY 2021 City of Decatur budget. And so, like Mark was saying, that they do usually explain all the things that they're going to do for the community and what they plan to do. And so this right here is a snapshot of, they list the accomplishments of the former fiscal year's budget, and then they also put directly underneath that the projects and programs and policies that they have for the current upcoming fiscal year and what they plan on doing with that. And on the next slide, there's some more pictures of the City of Decatur hosts a Touch a Budget program, like I mentioned earlier, so where citizens actually get to physically touch a budget and see what's inside of it and provide input. This program, along with the City of Decatur Budget Happy Hour, is highly praised because of its community-driven process and the input that it allows citizens to have. And the city also provides a copy of the budget to each household if they would like to request one, and provides copies to the local library as well as places them online. And so now we're going to kind of compare the two different types and look at their key similarities and differences. So first we'll look at Sedgwick County. And so they spend a lot of time preparing the budget internally. So like I mentioned earlier, all those retreats that they have, the different hearings they have within their departments, they spend a lot of time focusing on drafting the budget based on the current economic outlook for their county. And they do that inside of the department. So there's not much public input on that. And like I said, they focus on the future economic conditions and figure out how to weave that into their budget. And on the previous slide about the snapshot of the budget, for the sheriff's justification, they talk about being able to save money by purchasing a new plane, which they could service in Wichita instead of using the old plane that they had that had to be serviced across the country. And they also set clear financial and policy goals. So within their budget, they establish what their economic goals are, and they talk about why that is financially responsible, and they talk a lot about how Kansas requires them to do certain things, like having a balanced budget or making all these different types of requests if they need additional funding. And citizen input is usually reserved for after the final budget proposal is released. So after the county manager releases his final budget proposal that has been pre-approved by all of the other departments, then citizens are allowed to put input. And it provides and they also provide an understanding the budget guide inside of the adopted budget. So right before they get into the meat of the budget, they provide different types of like dictionaries or kind of like a guide for how to examine the budget and what different words mean so that everybody can understand it. And now looking at the city of Decatur, and they offer a lot of community input through the budgeting process. So at every stage, there's an opportunity for not only the departments of the county, but for also the citizens who are paying taxes to be able to provide input on any type of issue that they may see or address any kind of concern that they may have. And again, they request citizen a priority survey prior to planning. So before they even get started, they send out a survey and request citizens to fill that survey out so they can understand what the citizens need and what they may want for their community. And they focus a lot on the social needs of the community when drafting the budget. They want to know, where do you want sidewalks? What are the types of programs you think you need? And the city leaders communicate very well with the current and completed steps during the budgeting months. Even with the COVID-19 outbreak, the city of Decatur has done a really great job of hosting all of these public hearings online and making sure that citizens know where to find them and know what step of the budgeting process that the city is in. And so on the next slide, we'll be looking at the benefits of both types. So there are many different types of budgeting styles that local governments decide to use based on the needs of their community and the operating budget they plan to use for the upcoming fiscal year. And so the budget-driven style, like Sedgwick County, Kansas use, enhances local government transparency about future funding and spending, and it explains the future economic outlook of the county or city just as they do in the financial forecast, and it justifies spending based on the availability of funding and possible revenue, in addition to explaining why whatever step that they're taking will either save the county money or is more beneficial in the long run. And the community-driven style of budgeting, which is used by the city of Decatur, aligns the budget with citizen priorities. So they have that happy hour, they have the festival on the square, and they have all these types of hearings so they can really get an understanding of what the citizens want. And they also measure progress towards the priorities. So as you saw earlier, they show what they accomplished the year before and then show what they plan to accomplish and all the different opportunities that they plan on getting done with the next budget. And lastly, it enhances local government transparency about the budgeting process. So because they list out all the steps, because they allow citizens to have input at every step of the process, it allows citizens to really understand what's going on, because budgeting can be kind of difficult to understand, but allowing citizens to have that input and showing them exactly what steps there are in the process, and then going further to let them know what step the government is in that stage of the process, just allows citizens to know what's going on, and then allows them to address any questions or concerns that they may have. And so this last slide is a little bit about me. Like Mark said, I am a student at the University of Georgia, and I'm majoring in international affairs and political science. Fingers crossed, I will be graduating May of 2021. And at UGA, I'm a member of the Art Society, which are the official goodwill ambassadors of the University of Georgia. I'm an advisor advocate for University Judiciary, and I'm a campus tour leader at the Visitor Center. Previously, I have interned with the Georgia Public Defenders Council and work with the Women's Public Leadership Network and have worked with the Partnership Against Domestic Violence. I'm from Riverdale, Georgia, and I also love the city of Decatur. I love going on the Decatur Square on weekends when I have time, and some of my interests include criminal justice reform, international diplomacy, and environmental policy reform. I plan on going to law school and becoming a criminal defense attorney.
Well, thank you very much, Jessica. I will share with you, I think the last two city managers from Decatur have been from the University of North Carolina. So maybe we'll get them to think about University of Georgia here in the near future for the next one.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So we certainly appreciate you taking the time. The reason why this is so important is you're able to really understand how those cities and counties and local governments really step forward and decide which things they're going to spend money on. You know, when I work with companies on economic development reasons, I always say, pick up the local government budget and you really will understand where that community's heading. And so I always drive them that. And every summer we bring in the team of interns to ramp up our review of budgets, because most of them come due in July 1st, and we give them an opportunity to read through more budgets than they ever probably expected to read in their entire life in one summer, so they really get used to it. So we want to thank you for your time today, Jessica, and we look forward to another session here in the near future for our members. Thank you.
Thank you.